Muy buenas tardes a todos. Le damos las gracias por acompañarnos el día de hoy en la última sesión de la conferencia Prehuracanes 2021. Mi nombre es Cristal Madrid, soy la oficial de comunicaciones de la Cruz Roja Americana para las Américas y el Caribe. Y antes de comenzar con nuestra sesión, quisiera recordarle a todos los que nos acompañan que pueden escoger su idioma de preferencia en la parte inferior de su pantalla, en el icono que tiene forma de globo terráqueo. Pueden escoger entre español, inglés o francés. También quiero recordarles que sus preguntas y comentarios son bienvenidos utilizando las funciones del chat o la sección de preguntas y respuestas que se encuentra igualmente en la parte inferior de su pantalla de Zoom. Quisiera recordar que posterior a esta última sesión tendremos la clausura oficial y le invitamos a todos a compartir y repasar este viaje de aprendizaje que hemos obtenido en estos 3 días de conferencia. Ahora sí, sin más, es un honor presentar nuestra sesión Gestión de la Información, alianza entre el Centro Pacífico de Desastres y Observatorio del Riesgo de la Federación Internacional de la Cruz Roja y Media Luna Roja. Comenzaremos esta sesión con la valiosa intervención de la doctora Henry Hoggy, quien ha dedicado más de 20 años de su vida académica y profesional al avance de las prácticas basadas en la evidencia en el campo de la gestión de desastres. Sentó las bases de la metodología de evaluación de riesgos y preparación para desastres que se utilizan actualmente a nivel mundial. La amplitud de su carrera abarca operaciones de respuestas de práctica a nivel estatal, local, nacional e internacional, el desarrollo de planes nacionales de gestión de desastres, iniciativas multinacionales y regionales de reducción de riesgos, entre otros. La doctora Hoggy recibió su doctorado en la Universidad del Sur de Florida y actualmente es miembro de la Junta de Directores de la Universidad de Georgetown en el programa de gestión de emergencias y desastres. Muchísimas gracias, doctora, por estar hoy con nosotros y el panel es todo suyo.
Well, aloha, and thank you for having me here today. I am thrilled to be able to participate in this conference and in today's session. I have a very close relationship with the Red Cross and actually started my career with the American Red Cross, and am thrilled to be able to present to you today some of the work that we are doing in disaster management. So as we begin, I just want to mention that the Pacific Disaster Center is located in Hawaii, but we do have a global mission, and that mission is a focus on data-driven decision-making, evidence-based decision-making, and early warning. So today we're going to have 3 speakers. Myself, I'm the Director of Global Operations. Then we're going to transition to Paulo Fernandez, who runs our Latin American Caribbean operations. And then finally to Alex Carreras, who will be talking to you about our system and who is one of our main supporters out of Miami. So today we're going to talk about a little bit about PDC. And then we're going to talk about our efforts in risk reduction, understanding risk and applying risk, before we provide you with some practical applications for our work using not only our technology, but also leveraging our partnerships. So if you're not familiar with PDC, we've been around for over close to 25 years now. And we actually started as a result of Hurricane Iniki back in '92. Some of you might remember that it really destroyed the island of Kauai. And it was at that time that we realized we needed to be leveraging the best science and the best technology to make decisions to reduce losses and save lives. We've got 8 global locations. We provide early warning for over 20 different hazard types, and we're managed by the University of Hawaii. So we are an applied research center with a focus on taking the best science out there and ensuring that it gets into the hands of decision makers. So PDC really is the bridge between the academic community and the practitioners in the field. And many of those practitioners are part of the IFRC community. We have a very structured approach to how we look at disasters, how we look at disaster management, and how we look at informing decision makers. So our first focus is always on the information. Do we have the data? And that information comes in a lot of different forms. We then apply the most cutting edge science and technology so that we can understand the information and make solid decisions. But none of that can happen if we don't have this exchange with partnerships, and that we all realize that we're a very important piece of the disaster management puzzle that are geared towards really protecting our communities and the globe. So how do we do that? Well, we do that in several ways, but our main focus is really making sure that we've got data and information from a variety of sources, traditional and non-traditional. As we're all on social media, as we're engaging with remotely sensed data, and in the days of COVID, when we're having to work remotely, how can we take information generated in a lot of different ways, pull it together into PDC models to analyze that and provide actionable risk intelligence? And that is what a decision maker needs. Many times the decision makers are elected politicians or have a background in another area. They are not experts in hurricanes or in tsunamis or storm surge. So we want to make sure that we're providing that information in a way that makes sense. And we leverage a lot of our models to do that. So today you're going to hear a little bit about the AIM model. That's the All Hazards Impact Model. And it is the highest resolution model in the world that focuses on really understanding what is in the environment or the area that the storm or the hurricane or the event is going to impact. And what we're able to do is, in even data poor environments, provide an understanding of what is there. So what is the built environment? What is the population? What does that population look like? Do we need to bring in more diapers because we've got a lot of young children, or do we need additional support because we have a large group of elderly? We also then translate that information into understanding what the impact is to critical infrastructure. How many hospitals or clinics will be impacted? What about your emergency operations centers, your shelters? We then take that information and talk about what the potential needs would be. So how much food, water, shelter, refuse is required, so that collectively the global community and the national community have a starting point for making decisions. And then we provide that information through a system that is freely available to emergency managers worldwide. And I'm happy to report it comes in multiple languages, so you will be able to have it in any language that you function. But the system itself provides over 6,000 data layers. And this is anything from the historic hazard to support planning, to the real-time forecasting, and understanding risk, vulnerability, coping capacity, all of those elements. So we're going to discuss a little bit about that today. But PDC is geared more than just the disaster or the disaster data. We also want to be able to function and provide resources in a way that is compliant with how disaster managers think and execute their work. So what we're going to demonstrate for you today and provide highlights on are the many key features that DisasterAWARE provides, including early smart alerting, asset tracking. So if you bring a team in, if an IFRC team is coming in, where are they? Are they exposed to a secondary or tertiary hazard? As well as being able to import your own data and use it on multiple devices. So that's the other thing, is we're used to working in the field as well as in large operation centers. So all of our information is available not only on your computer, but on your smartphone. And our goal is really to translate and provide information and answers to the 4 key questions that any emergency manager cares about. What happened? Where did it happen? How bad is it? And what do I need to do about it? So if we have been able to answer those 4 questions, then we have successfully advanced disaster management and supported our partners. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paulo Fernandez, who's going to take us through some of the risk information that PDC is able to share. And so with that, Paulo, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Erin. Can you guys hear me and see my screen? All right. Yeah, thanks, Erin. Thanks, everyone, for allowing me to be here today. I'm really glad to be part of this today. As Erin mentioned, I'm the Latin American Caribbean advisor for the Pacific Disaster Center, and I work out of Brazil mainly, but I support the region, so I'm always traveling around. I've probably met some of you in some of the countries that we've worked in. So as Erin mentioned, one of the key things that we do at PDC is the risk and vulnerability assessment. We've been doing the risk and vulnerability assessment globally for many years. And because of the success of that assessment, we started doing this risk and vulnerability assessment at a subnational level in the region. And I'm also proud to say that our region, the Latin American Caribbean region, is where this all started about six or 7 years ago. And the first countries that we did the NDPBA, the National Disaster Preparedness Baseline Assessment, was Peru, Jamaica, and El Salvador. And now we've been doing, in our region, we have 10 completed countries. We have, let me go on to the next slide here. We have one country, which is Panama, where we just presented the final results a couple of weeks ago, and we are currently working on providing the final analysis and the final report coming out soon. We've got one country, Belize, at its final phases. We've got 3 more countries coming up in the next this year, and a few other countries coming up in 2022, as well as PDC going back to some of the original countries to reassess and basically see how far we've come in the last 5 years, where since that we did the initial baseline assessment. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but I just wanted to kind of provide you this overview of how big this project is. Just in our AOR, we're working the 3 countries I mentioned coming up this year. It's actually 3 projects. One of them is the seven Eastern Caribbean islands. So we actually have 9 countries coming up this year. So it's a huge project covering most of our AOR. And I know a lot of you have worked in some of these areas or have worked in similar projects. So I'm sure we'll be working with you whenever we work in the country where you're working. But you know, the baseline assessment is a big success for PDC and for everyone participating in this. It's basically the National Disaster Preparedness Baseline Assessment has 4 parts. It has the data and information exchange. So this is a really important piece of the work because we work directly with the NDMO, the National Disaster Management Organization of each country. They are our main partners in this project. And through stakeholder collaboration, meaning we work, we bring the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Public Works, and many others, NGOs, and even the private sector when they are part of the disaster management system. We bring them all together where we do these workshops and this data information exchanges where we collectively we work gathering the information and exchanging the different programs that the different agencies may be working on and they may not be aware of. So that's the information exchange. The other section, the other part of the NDPBA is the risk and vulnerability assessment. So we'll show you a little bit more of that. But as I mentioned, the risk and vulnerability assessment was being done globally by PDC, where you can compare each country using a composite index approach, and you're able to compare the countries and see what's driving the risk in that country. So now we started doing this project, we're doing this at a sub-national level. We're looking at the countries, provincial level or departmental level, whatever state level, whatever that country's administrative level is. And we can do this even at a municipal level if the data is available. The other piece of this is a disaster management analysis, which is more of a qualitative assessment of the NDPBA. This contextualizes the RVA. I'll also show you a graph soon here about that. And then what I mentioned earlier, we provide a 5-year disaster risk reduction action plan, not only for the disaster management organization, but also for all the supporting agencies like the NGOs and other ministries that have resources, and to ensure that they are focusing their efforts and their resources in the location that is most needed and the sector that is most needed, right? So one of the things that we're also looking at is all the critical data, critical infrastructure data. So here's some sample data sets that we look at, and this is used for us to kind of look at the exposure, but also is very important when we're looking at response. When we're looking at response of an actual ongoing event, where is my critical infrastructure? Is it impacted by this event, and so on? So the risk and vulnerability assessment has all these different themes, and multi-hazard exposure. This is where we're looking at the people and the critical infrastructure and the resources, and is it in a location where there is a flood or hurricane or a volcano. So we're looking at those hazards zones, and we're looking at the exposure. And then at the vulnerability, this is a hazard independent section of the RVA, and this is where we're looking at the socioeconomic situation of that community. The next one is the coping capacity. So we're looking at, and basically the coping capacity is a positive, right? Does this community have a capacity, have the capacity to respond? The other piece of this is the disaster management capacity. So basically the disaster management capacity starts where coping capacity ends. So as the system in that community can allow for day-to-day response, hospital beds and shelter and that kind of stuff. Once you have an actual event where you need the NDMO to support and the government to intervene, then you have the disaster management capacity. Do they have that capacity to support that community? And then the next one is the resilience, which is a combination of the vulnerability, the coping capacity, and the disaster management capacity. And basically, you're looking at how resilient that community is, right? How vulnerable are they, and are they able to overcome that specific vulnerability and hazard and event on their own? And then you've got the multi-hazard risk, which kind of encompasses everything, and it looks at the whole picture. So you're able to look at a country and see what areas of the country are more at risk than others. Just as an example here of the vulnerability, some of the subcomponents that we look at just for the vulnerability, as I mentioned, the socioeconomic component. We're looking at population pressures, we're looking at gender inequality, economic constraints, information access, which is like education, access to clean water, health status, and so on. So these are some of the subcomponents that we look at vulnerability. The nice thing about the NDPBA is because this is a composite index approach, and it's very modular. So we're able to, if something does not make sense to a country, we're able to adjust, remove it or modify it, and it makes no difference how we get the results. So it's really important for the region as you're dealing with islands in the Caribbean and you're dealing with huge continental countries, or it's very different, even the type of hazards and so on. So it's very modular. We're able to add and remove as needed, and it does not impact how we calculate and how we get the results. And each of the subcomponents have indicators. Here's an example of the health status subcomponent of vulnerability. Just two indicators that we normally collect. These are also samples. Some, depending on the countries, they collect data differently. We adjust for that. So this is just an example of some of the indicators that we use. And then I talked about the disaster management analysis. This is where we're contextualizing the RVA. The RVA by itself does not give us the best idea of the capability and the existing, the on-ground situation of that community, that province, that department. So the disaster management analysis allows us to really look at this at a national, subnational, and local level. And it also gives us this, we're looking at a legal framework. We're looking at the training and exercises and inventory and things like that of the agencies that support a potential disaster. And when you do that, you really kind of fill in the holes and the gaps that the RVA leaves us, because there may be already a plan by the NDMO to cover that gap that the RVA is going to give us. So we want to capture that as well, right? Because if there is a plan, that may not be top priority, as another area may have similar gap in the RVA and they may not have a plan. So we contextualize this whole thing. As you can see there on the right side, there's stakeholder collaboration. This is really important because throughout this whole project, we're working with the stakeholders. They are looking at the data to make sure we've got the latest and greatest data that to feed the analysis. And also, as we're providing the recommendations, they are also working with us to make sure that it makes sense for them. So stakeholder collaboration from the beginning to end is part of this analysis. And as we're done with this project, once we complete this project and we have a final report, we're not done. We provide the country with additional support. They become one of our priority partners. So if there is a disaster or something like that in the region, PDC provides them with mapping support. Because we have all this data that they provided to us, we provide this back to them. So a lot of times they don't have this data in one single place. This is a really helpful project for that. So we gather all the data and we provide it back to them. But also, if they are dealing with a large response, a lot of times their comms are down, their systems are down, they don't have access to their data, or they're busy, right? Resources. And PDC is always here to support the partner nation after that as well. Just some examples. This is Trinidad and Tobago is one of the countries we just completed the NDPBA. This is an example. We have the assessment, the final report, where it gives you this overall view of the RVA and the DMA for the country, where you can compare the different provinces or departments or whatever that administration level is. And then you also have this other section of the final report, which is the provincial or departmental pullout. In this case, for Trinidad and Tobago, it's municipalities. So you've got the municipality profile. I know there are about 6 pages, and basically gives you this detailed information on that municipality of the exposure for each hazard. It gives you information on the vulnerability, the coping capacity, and so on. And it also gives you specific recommendations for that municipality. So if something happens in that area, you don't have to go looking through the whole country and make your own analysis. You can kind of just pull pull out of the report, and you can see the recommendations. You can see where their gaps are, their vulnerabilities are, and you're able to provide that support very quickly. So if they don't have good access to clean water, if they don't have shelters, that kind of stuff, they're going to need water, water filters or water. They're going to need shelters, and that kind of stuff. So it gives you that type of information. And then here, right here at the bottom, you can see one of the products that we also provide. If there is a flood in Trinidad and Tobago, you can see with the data that we have we can provide this product similar to what Dr. Hugh mentioned earlier, where we're giving the critical infrastructure exposure, the capital exposure, the elderly and the adults and the children count and all of that, so you really have an idea of the situation on the ground based on the latest and greatest data provided to us by the country. So multi-hazard exposure, this is just a quick look at for Trinidad and Tobago, the multi-hazard exposure, vulnerability, coping capacity. When you're looking at the overall for the country, you can compare all the municipalities and see which ones have a highest coping capacity, which one has a higher vulnerability and highest multi-hazard exposure. So this really allows you to prioritize your efforts for planning purposes and for response. Another way that we use the data, right? This is data for decision making. We use this data for COVID, right? As you see here as examples for Honduras and Argentina, these are some of the products that we were producing and providing to our partners. Some of you may have seen this before. We were providing these updates at a weekly basis, but basically this comes out of our NDPBA and our global risk and vulnerability assessment. So you're able to see, how that countries, how many physicians per 10,000 people, how many nurses per 10,000 people, and so on. And you can see that at a subnational level. So if there is a spike number of COVID cases in a specific area in Argentina, you're able to see, do they have enough doctors, enough nurses, and hospital beds to support that? And you're able to quickly support that area, with mobile hospitals, and that kind of stuff. And then, we have Alex here that will show you the system, DisasterAWARE, that is also a product of PDC. You all have access to it. There's no, you just need to request an account and you get a username and password. We have access to this, but the data that comes from the NDPBA and from the Global Risk and Vulnerability Assessment is also available in the system. So as you can see these screenshots here, you can put the confirmed cases right over the healthcare capacity index that's out of the NDPBA. So you can really have a good look at, for example, in Argentina, some of those lighter color departments have a very low healthcare capacity. So you may want to watch those departments, or provinces. I don't remember what is in Argentina, but you may want to focus your efforts on those areas in case there is a spike on COVID or any other diseases, right? So I think this is it for my section. The next section is Alex. I really appreciate your time, and Alex, over to you.
Thank you, Paulo. How do you guys hear me? Awesome. Just give me 1 second and you guys are able to see my screen. Great. So just wanted to thank the IFRC for allowing us to highlight not only our organization, but also the system, DisasterAWARE. So how Dr. Aaron Huey was reporting earlier, and also Paulo Fernandez, all the information that Paulo just went over within the global RVA and also the NDPBA, all of this data is within DisasterAWARE. I know that a lot of people within the organization are familiar with the system, but for those that are not familiar with the system, I'm just going to give a very brief overview. And give me 1 second. Let me put this slideshow. All right, so bear with me. Okay, that's better. All right, so for those that are not aware of the DisasterAWARE system, The DisasterAWARE system is a risk intelligence support platform. It's used by government institutions, by academia, the emergency response community, from not only within here in our hemisphere, but around the world. And the system is designed to support early warning, multi-hazard monitoring, operational response to recovery, risk assessment and mitigation, and also disaster planning and preparedness for exercises. So in basically in a quick sentence, DisasterAWARE allows decision makers to gain a deeper understanding of the potential impacts of hazards on the communities and systems within their geographic location. It offers the largest collection of scientifically verified geospatial data and modeling tools to help assess hazard risk and impacts around the world. So here again, we're just going to highlight a few of the key features within the system. How Dr. Huey had mentioned earlier, smart alert, early warning, asset tracking for mobile and stationary assets, real-time historical hazards, and also integrating modeling, spatial maps, and analytical reports, just to highlight a few. And these features basically allow us to make informed decisions through data in the system. You can access not only critical infrastructure, but also the hazard areas, forecasts and impacts, the risk and vulnerability that we just went over with Mr. Fernandez. And at the same time, on the bottom right corner, you can see the also critical infrastructure status. Specifically, this is highlighting airfield and port statuses during Hurricane Eta and Iota in Honduras and Guatemala and some parts of San Salvador. Not only are you able to access that data, but at the same time, you can look at historical data. It's specifically in our disaster response events folder, you can access the data specific to a response like Hurricane Eta and Iota, or any more recent response, for example, La Soufrière volcano in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, or historical hazards that have affected either any geographic location within not only the Americas, but the AOR as well. So just to go a little bit more in depth of our Smart Alert and Early Warning feature within the system. And you can customize Smart Alert, which you can receive either through email or through also through your SMS texting. And you can customize what hazards are of interest to you, and not only which hazards types are of interest of you, but what severity of that hazard is an interest for you to receive an alert. And at the same time, we can customize the geographic location of receiving those alerts, not only within a specific country level, you can do it also at a department level, and at the same time, you can do it at a regional level or global level as well. Just be warned, if it is a global level, you will be receiving a lot of notifications and things like that. Now, asset tracking and alerting, I think this is how to reiterate Dr. Huey's mentioning for the IFRC, if you have a team on the ground that is mobile, or even it could be a stationary asset in regards to disaster recovery, disaster warehouse or a EOC, we can import mapping service that can track your assets locations, whether they're mobile or stationary. And at the same time, with the Smart Alert feature in our system, we can provide you alerts of whether those hazards, whether those assets are being threatened by a hazard in the area. And here we can see the ability for you to quickly access hazard information. Specifically here is in the information tab, you get a very quick summary of the situation for COVID-19 within Latin America. You can also access the latest products on the tab to the left of information that are related to COVID-19 in the region. And these products are not necessarily just from PDC, but also from various organizations, other stakeholders, our partners, NGOs, also NDMOs, and other organizations that are providing that information. And the benefit of this is that it's all in a centralized location. We understand that a lot of people have personal preferences to sourcing different data, different information. And one of the benefits of having that access to all those different resources is DisasterAWARE, where you can find them in a central location. Again, mentioning that you can access the latest updates, latest products within the products tab of any hazard within the system, whether it's hurricane, COVID-19, volcano, drought, severe thunderstorms, and anything of those sorts. It could be a situation report, hazard forecasts and impacts, damage assessments, and also different types of advanced modeling and analysis, all within that hazard. One of the new features that we have within the system, which personally I think it's very beneficial not only for us within PDC, but also our stakeholders and partners and those that collaborate with us, is the print feature. You're able to create and print custom maps within the system that can leverage different data. For example, here we have the La Soufrière eruption in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and the layers you can see there are the ash deposits and the status of critical infrastructure. Also, at the same time, you can import data from outside of the system and basically have some value add to that creation of that map. So here we can see the live cameras feed. It's a very beneficial feature. Specifically here, we can see this was being used here in Miami, Florida during Hurricane Irma. And it allows you to not only assess the condition and the impacts of the hazard from a live feed camera, but also you can see the road status, the contraflow, and the feed usually depends on each individual camera, but it's usually between a 30-second to a minute refresh feed. Another beneficial feature within the system is you're able to, again, quickly add data and share that data. One of the features that allows you to share data is bookmarks. Bookmarks, the best way to explain it is to think of it as bookmarking an internet web page. This allows you to share exactly what you're working on within the system to other stakeholders and other partners that can quickly access via a link and see exactly what you're seeing or what you're working on in regards to adding any data to the system via our drawings tool as well. Again, you don't have to be a data mapping expert to add your own features to the map. And it could be something as annotations, shapes, images, and things of that nature. So here we were highlighting the disaster response events folder, specifically La Soufrière volcano. Here under the La Soufrière volcano folder, we can see various layers of hazard information from ash deposits to the hazard zones within St. Vincent. And also in regards to, we have emergency infrastructure data, damage assessments data, which gives you the status of the critical infrastructure as the disaster was unfolding and evolving. And again, a lot of this information is provided to us directly from our partners within country and also other international partners and stakeholders. Here we see DisasterAWARE in action. To the left, volcano hazard zones. In the middle is the ash clouds. And to the right is the ash deposits from the La Soufrière eruption. Again, infrastructure is very valuable, knowing where your critical infrastructure is during a response situation and knowing how exposed that infrastructure is to that specific hazard that's ongoing. Shelters and evacuation muster points, again, very important, especially during the situation in La Soufrière volcano. One of the situations that's very unique to the Eastern Caribbean islands is the fact that where do you go if, let's say, the whole island itself is declared unsafe, and you have other evacuation points that luckily a lot of the neighboring islands like the Southern Grenadines, also Barbados, and other islands like Martinique and Guadeloupe were able to not only receive evacuees, but also lend a helping hand in that situation. Here again, to the left, we can see estimated wind impacts from IOTA. Again, the value here is that we can add, layer our data that we already have in the global risk assessment. And we could see on a subnational level how those wind impacts will severely impact the departments that are located within that tract of the hurricane. And, you know, it is a necessary tool in regards to how you can basically dedicate your resources in a situation like that. Again, risk and vulnerability to the right. In the middle, we can see the impact assessment, which showcases affected affected persons, families evacuated, damaged homes and bridges, giving you an idea on a department level and municipality level as well, if the data is available, for you to understand the severity of the impacts of a specific hazard. And at the same time, on the right, we can see shelter populations within department or municipality, and also food distribution locations. Okay, here we see damage assessments, secondary hazards, again, airfield and port statuses. And another thing that was very a major concern in Honduras during Hurricane Eta and Iota was the status of dams. And, you know, there were certain dams that were at near capacity or at the point of spilling over and things like that. So that was a major concern for Hurricane Eta and Iota. Again, here to reiterate what Dr. Huey was stating, here is an example of estimated wind impact analysis, provides a potential population exposure, and at the same time, rainfall impact analysis gives you the breakdown of potential need, total capital exposure in the area. And just another example of the exposure modeling that we do, and this specific product was done jointly with our United Nations OCHA partners, and it's done jointly with PDC. Here, potential exposure to flooding, which Mr. Fernandez had already covered. And the one to the right, we can see exposure to landslides, which again, during Hurricane Eta and Iota, another major concern. Here we see the 72-hour rainfall forecast for Hurricane Eta. And at the same time, we can also see the potential of the landslide hazards, which were triggered by the heavy precipitation in the region. And here's the hazard zones within the La Soufrière volcano, and also the emergency services. Again, the value add here is to see which one, you know, what emergency services, what critical infrastructure is exposed to that zone. And at the same time, it allows you to see how is it going to affect your ability to leverage those emergency services if those that are located within that volcanic hazard zone, for example, the very high hazard zone, aren't inaccessible to your population. And here to wrap it up is an example of our impact and needs analysis. Again, provides you the potential population exposure, the total capital exposure, and the breakdown of needs, how many vulnerable people are in the area, how many calculated meals per day you would need, how many liters of water, and etc. And here I will turn it back over to Dr. Huey.
Aloha, everyone. I just wanted to pop in at the end and share with you something that we haven't shared widely. So IFRC, and this event is the first to know that this is coming right here in July, but we have a new offering that will be integrated into DisasterAWARE called Event Brief. So if you can go to the next slide, Alex. The idea behind the event brief is for every major event, so we've identified thresholds, so really large scale events, we will be producing a fully automated report, fully automated, so no human, no delay, where we will be able to identify the hazard itself, that impacts, so what is the population, what is the economic exposure, what is the potential impact to lifelines, water, power, communication infrastructure. We also will be bringing in the historic information so that emergency managers can quickly determine if that area that's being impacted by an event has it been 50 years since that community has been impacted, or is it really the last, we had an event last year, and it'll give information about the history in that area. So how many people either dead, injured, economic impact. It will bring in the latest situational awareness reports from any of our partners. So IFRC will be in there. It will also bring up live cameras if you're in the region, the risk and vulnerability reports, and what other agencies and organizations are functioning in that area and on the ground. So what other NGOs or people that we might want to engage with. So this is all automated, and it's going to be released here in July. If we go next slide. This is an actual brief from Guatemala. So for the volcano in Guatemala, Fuego, we can see not only the risk and vulnerability, not only the breakdown of potential needs or the capital exposed from this event, but we're also bringing in the live news stories. We're pulling in travel advisories and the current weather on the ground. So the combination of all of this different information is really to help agencies and organizations like IFRC fill a gap in knowledge between onset of the event and boots on the ground, and be able to have something for which we can plan towards and know that collectively the international community is all moving in the same direction. So with that, I'm going to actually end the PDC brief. I know there were lots of questions and we look forward to that, but turn it over to our partner, Justin at the IFRC, so we could talk a little bit about what's happening there and some of the linkages. So over to you, Justin.
Thank you very much, Erin. Good afternoon, buenos tardes, and bonsoir. My name is Justin Giannetti. I'm pretty excited to be speaking with you all today. I am the Senior Risk Officer for IFRC here in Geneva, Switzerland. And I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of the enhanced version of the RiskWatch product and process, which we at IFRC use with the regional offices in each of the regions, and to engage with the national society. So I'm just going to share my screen with you now. Bear with me. And hopefully you're all seeing it. Great. So IFRC already has a product and process called the RiskWatch. But what we've been working on for the last 6 or 7 months or so with partners are a number of enhancements which we're going to roll out over the course of this year and launch in October. And the reason why I'm presenting this to you here today is because the PDC is one of our main partners with whom we're developing some of these new features. So let me just give you a brief overview of what this looks like. So the objective of the Risk Watch, firstly, is to help the national societies and the regional offices to consider key risks and take anticipatory action to mitigate the impacts of those risks, either by strengthening disaster risk reduction, early action and preparedness for response kind of measures. So to shift more and more action and investment into anticipation, not just response. Of course, we still support response, but it's to emphasize what can be done before a disaster occurs. So the vision for this new system is a semi-automated information management system, which will update and illustrate these risks together with existing information from national societies, plans, and a combination of potential early actions from EPOAs and early action plans. And this will all be visible on a special dashboard on the Go platform, on IFRC's Go platform. And this will be available, of course, at the global level, but for every country and for every region. In addition, we have a monthly call with each of the regional offices who engage directly with the national societies to basically identify the risks and discuss what potential actions can be taken to address the risks ahead of time. And then in addition, what we aim to do is to produce an automated monthly report based on the discussions that occur with the regional offices and the national societies about the key risks and what actions can be taken to address them in order to basically mobilize resources for anticipatory action, for effective early action and response. So what kind of information can you expect to see? One is about seasonal information about risks. So here on the left, you see at a global scale, but with a zoom in on the World Bank regions, disaster displacement risk associated with floods at the top in the lighter blue and storms in the bottom. And this gives us an understanding for seasonal hazards like floods and storms, where the risks are likely to manifest at what points of time during the year. And then, of course, we don't just stop at the regional level, but we have this information at the country level. So on the right, you see from the Disinventar database for Honduras, when you're most likely to see, disaster displacement in Honduras, during the year. So we can see clearly here that it's concentrated disproportionately in October, with September and May having also some displacement risk as well. So again, this whether it's economic loss risk or disaster displacement risk or other kinds of risks, this is the kind of information you'll be able to see at a kind of a seasonal or monthly scale. And then, as our colleagues from PDC just presented, we're going to ingest from PDC a lot of the information that was just presented, in fact. So this will be at your fingertips on the Go platform as well, so that we can visualize the impacts or the simulated or estimated impacts of forecasted or observed hazard events of many, for almost any hazard that you can think of. In addition to the hazard impact modeling from PDC, we're also working with other Red Cross, Red Crescent national societies, like the Netherlands Red Cross's 510, who has a typhoon model, as well as with OCHA and the Federal Technical Institute of Switzerland, ETH in Zurich, who in collaboration with IFRC and Meteo Swiss are going to be developing a similar hazard impact model. And the idea is to bring all of this information together to have an ensemble of ensembles, so that we can basically assess the performance of these tools and these models over time across many, many events, so that we can then feed the information back to improve the calibration and the accuracy of all of them over time. And then the last step is to combine that with the information about potential early actions. So when an event is forecast or when a risk is likely to manifest, we can discuss with the regional offices and national societies what potential actions can be taken through analysis of past events, just as Erin mentioned a few moments ago, and both responses to past events and anticipatory actions taken in preparation for past events, as well in evaluating the effectiveness of those events. So we can identify what are truly and objectively good practices or quote unquote best practices for different kinds of hazards, in different kinds of locations. So this is what you're seeing here is actually, I'm really apologetic for it. It's quite ugly actually, but it's a schematic diagram of the back end of the system. And I'm closing with this just because over the next few weeks, we're going to be developing the wireframes or a mock-up of these new features on the Go platform. And if you're interested, we'd be delighted to have an in-depth session with you to explore your needs so that we can make sure that we incorporate, the relevant components that are of most interest and use to you onto the Go platform so that we visualize the data in the way that is the most intuitive and user-friendly for you. So that basically you can co-create this with us over the next few weeks. And then this will just be the first version of it, which launches in October, as I mentioned a few moments ago. But what we'll continue doing is take stock of additional needs and additional use cases so that we can add more data, incorporate more information about more kinds of risks, and additional features and functionality into the Go platform for you, so you have this information at your disposal when you need it. And as Erin and the colleagues from the PDC mentioned, what we can also do is send this information back to the PDC's DisasterAWARE Center where relevant. So if they want to do some additional triangulation, if there are events that we're covering that haven't yet been generated in the DisasterAWARE or for which there's data missing in DisasterAWARE, we can help populate the data on their platform as well by generating pre-populated field reports or early warning field reports on the Go platform, which the national societies can then validate and then send over to PDC. So that's it for now. I just have my contact information for you here. As I mentioned, we're available to do a more in-depth overview of this, or if you want a preview of the wireframes in about 2 or 3 weeks' time in the middle of July, we'd be delighted to present them to you so that you can feed into this process and we can develop it to suit your needs. Thanks very much, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all this evening. So thank you, and over from me.
Well, greetings, everyone. I want to thank again the hundreds of colleagues who've dialed in from around the world, and to our amazing presenters. We use a word in Hawaii called ohana, familia, and it really does take a family. And we are part of the IFRC, the RCRC family. Thank you, Dr. Huey, for telling us about your experience and your family's experience. And thank you, Justin, for dialing in very late in Geneva. We've got some great questions, and I do want to do a scene setter. We've worked with the IFRC colleagues for decades, but we're so excited as we are announcing this month with our signing of a global MOU and the great work starting over 2 years ago, again with Jamila in Geneva and working with the amazing colleagues in Panama. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Maylin. We at PDC as an applied research center, our partnerships are what really move the needle, and it really is this partnership. It's a priority. One great question that came up, and I'll defer it over to Dr. Huey and to Justin. This idea of not waiting for the disaster, but looking ahead, and we are of course at PDC a part of the Anticipation Hub. We've joined that, working closely with Lydia and Kara there in Geneva and their great work. One of our colleagues asked, what can you tell us more about the forecast models that we use? And I know we touched on our collaboration with UNOCHA at World Food Program. Dr. Huey, over to you for your thoughts, and then over to you, Justin.
Thanks so much, Joel, and it's an excellent question. We use a variety of exposure and forecast models for each different hazard type. And I'm happy to provide all the details, but since this is a hurricane conference, I'm going to focus exclusively on the hurricanes right now. And so the model that we're using is actually called the TAUS model, the Arbiter of Storms. And the reason that we chose this model is because it is a global model that provides all three threats. You know, the threat of the wind, the threat of the storm surge, and the threat of the rain. But the other reason why we've selected this model is because it translates what's coming from the authoritative source. So it's pulling from the National Weather Service or the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, or any agency that has that mission for issuing the official warning. And it translates that into something that is actionable. So when you look at the storm or the models that we have in DisasterAWARE, you'll see it's not going to say there's 130-mile-an-hour wind, although you can get that information too. It's going to actually tell you if you can expect the roof of your house to stay put. So what we're trying to do is translate it into something that would drive action for the individual and drive action for the community. So we're altering the way that that's communicated, and TAUS, we have found, is the best source for that. We've been using them for over a decade, and every single year the data, you know, as Justin talked about, calibrating and refining, it gets better every single year. But this has gone through a very rigorous review and has been accepted by the UN as the approach for our joint exposure products. So when you see products coming out this hurricane season, it will be based off of two specific models. One will be the TAUS model that leverages the official forecast, and the second will be PDC's AIM, All Hazard Impact Model. So we'll translate the, you know, miles per hour or kilometers per hour, knots, directly to potential impacts. So will there be trees swaying, or will the roof of your house be gone? And then the next thing is what to do. So those are the three models that we're using. I will just say we're happy to provide information on all hazard types. And if you want to dig into some of the data, we have very detailed metadata, so you'll be able to easily find which model is being used. And in some cases, we're using the same approach Justin is, which is that models of models approach.
Thank you, Dr. Huey. And again, we really appreciate that overview. There's a lot of data in our system, over 5,000 layers, and we're really cognizant that our colleagues have nicely in the chat said, how do we get access? You have the link in there. You can register. We want you all, as you're looking at your phones, we're all in the disaster business, and we want to get ahead of the curve. Please download the Disaster Alert app. It can go on any phone. 2 million people are already using it, many of our UN partners. So thank you for putting that in the chat. Justin, over to you for your thoughts on some of the models you're using. And again, the Go platform. We were so lucky to join your technical call a week ago. Again, Senora Casistilo, who leads our data team, sends her regards, and there's a lot of ongoing synergies there. Justin, over to you.
Thanks very much, Joel, and thanks, Erin. I don't have too much to add. I think Erin mentioned the key point, which is about the need to transform information about a hazard or a forecasted hazard into something actionable, like the impacts of that hazard. That's what people are most concerned about. It's not so much the wind itself, but what is the impact of the wind or the storm surge or the flood inundation. And this is critical for IFRC for scaling up anticipatory action, for refining and improving upon and massively scaling up forecast-based financing, forecast-based action, which is part of the IFRC 2030 strategy. And you can't really do this without models, and without models that are transparent and robust and well calibrated. So it's both something that's urgently needed and at the same time a long-term investment. Thanks.
Justin, thank you. We've seen a great question from colleagues on the technical side. You know, how could we combine, again, this idea of the logistics, the wash data, and put that into our application? And I know from my side, we have used these applications for many years, for decades. I personally used the DisasterAWARE application, and the ability to do asset tracking, the ability to add your own data. It is an amazing, what we call common operational picture, and built on the shoulders of giants with IFRC data and other data from UNDP and other colleagues. So for the UNDP colleagues that inquired, you all can use your .org or .int email to register. And then we're so lucky to have our experts from the region. And again, Alex, your presentation, and Paulo, a colleague had asked, do we have any data for Haiti? And I'm being rhetorical. over to you both for your thoughts. I know we've got a lot, but want you to speak to, we've got a lot of data for the Caribbean and Latin America. Over to your thoughts regarding Haiti.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Yes, we do have data. We haven't done the NDPBA in Haiti yet, but we do have a lot of data that we have worked with in-country agencies, especially during Hurricane Matthew and other hurricanes that have gone through the region. We have worked directly in support of the response events in the past few years. And with that, we've acquired a lot of data coming directly from those agencies. So although we haven't had done the risk and vulnerability assessment, the NDPBA, in Haiti, we do have a lot of data available in the system, as well as all of the alerts. The hazards are global, so you get the alerts, you get some of the in-country data as well.
And over to you, Alex, for any thoughts.
Yeah, no, just to reiterate what Paulo said, at this time, we haven't done the NDPBA assessment in Haiti. We know that there is a need for an assessment to be done. And as of right now, we have the data that you can find within the regional data folder in the DisasterAWARE system. And you can be able to find some of the data that we have in regards to Haiti specifically there, whether it's from demography, infrastructure, or anything in that realm.
Well, Alex, I will say I'm always learning more about this application. There's so much in there, and this entire team, and again, our global team of 60 colleagues and experts and applied scientists and GIS experts, we all stand ready to help, and we all work together. Often we were back channeling communications, preparing for this, getting ready for hurricane season. So this really does take a village. We're in the home stretch here. On behalf of the organizers, we do want to thank Valerie and the team, the communications team, great work. And we want you all to also stay on. There'll be the great closing ceremony after this. With no further ado, over to any final statements by colleagues. We will start with our colleague in Geneva, because I know the sun has finally set there. And Justin, thank you for your great work with the Go platform. And we'll circle around to Dr. Huey and then to colleagues in Miami and in Brazil. Over.
Thanks so much, Joel. Thanks to all of you, and sorry for the darkness behind me here. It is indeed nighttime. Just to say, if you have any questions, particularly to my colleagues from the regional office, country delegations, or national societies who want to be more involved in the development of these features on the Go platform, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And just to say, stay tuned, because our collaboration, as Joel mentioned and Aaron mentioned, with the PDC is really just going to kick off and accelerate now that we've signed this MOU and have a really clear path to generate more products and more useful products for you all together. It's really a symbiotic relationship, and we really enthusiastically look forward to taking it forward. So thanks to all of you.
Thank you, Justin, and aloha to everyone. I've appreciated the time today. I do think we just, scratched the surface on the capabilities. If nothing else, I hope we made you aware of products and services, data, information, and partnership that are available to you. And like we have with all of our baseline assessments and engagements, we always reach out to the Red Cross Society in country. And we do integrate your data into our system. So if you see the NDPBA data or you look in the regional folders, we will identify the Red Cross offices and operations. So we do have that. It's been a fantastic time, and I look forward to the expansion of this partnership, really to support the global mission of reducing losses and saving lives. Alex?
Yeah, no, just want to say again, thank you for the opportunity to allow PDC and also our capabilities and our platform being highlighted. Again, I'm based out of here from Miami. I'm fluent in Spanish. Mr. Fernandez is based out of Brazil, fluent in Portuguese. If there's anything that we can do to support any of your missions in the area and around the globe, please do not hesitate to reach out to PDC, to reach out to us personally. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate. I have appreciated the time presenting to all of you. Hopefully, this information was very helpful. I see a lot of great questions, and hopefully we answered some of those. And please feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any additional questions. I'm happy to support any of you here in the region. So thanks again, and have a great weekend.